Hi there, I'm Emma Hollywood and welcome to And the Show Goes On. I'm an actress and, like so many, I'm navigating the highs and lows of this unpredictable industry. But there's more to my story. I'm also living with an invisible illness. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the show really does go on. In each episode, we'll dive into the world of acting, uncovering the realities behind the glitz and the glamour. We'll talk openly about the challenges, from auditions to the art of managing it all with health challenges that don't take a day off. And I won't be alone. I'll be joined by incredible guests, actors, advocates, and others who share this journey. Together we'll share stories, laughter, insights, and inspiration to help you keep pushing forward no matter what. So join me every week on And the Show Goes On. Let's navigate this path together with resilience and a sense of humour, because no matter what, the show goes on. Hello and welcome back to And the Show Goes On. In today's episode we have the lovely Shreya M Patel. She's an actress, musician and also a mathematician. Didn't mean for that to rhyme. Just a disclaimer for this episode that during the Zoom interview something went wrong with the microphone, which meant that the microphone didn't work. You can still hear me, but the quality is not the best. I'm also in between microphones at the moment and I'm trying to decide what microphone is best for this podcast. So the sound quality for this episode might be a little bit different for the next episodes. But rest assured, I'm working out the best way to make the sound quality the best it can be for this podcast. Anyway, back to this episode. Thank you so much, Shreya, for this interview, and I hope you all enjoy. Hi, Shreya. Thank you so much for coming onto my podcast.
Thank you so much for
How are
having
you today?
me. I'm okay, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. So before we start, please can you tell the listeners just about yourself and what you do?
Yes, I am an actress and a musician. And I am an ambulatory wheelchair user and a walking stick user. So when I am acting, I usually perform in my wheelchair, and it's quite rare that I perform out of it. Yeah, that's me.
Amazing. So you say you're an actor. What first drew you into the world of acting? And you're a musician as well, aren't you? You do
Yes.
a bit of both. So what drew you into those areas, and what were your first experiences with them?
Okay. When it came to acting, it was like as a kid, I never did it until I was about 14 years old, and I think on a whim I just signed up for like a school play, and it was actually I actually was playing my headmistress in front of my headmistress, which was hilarious to me. But like I remember this just distinct feeling when I was performing, that I was like, wow, this feels like home. Like this just feels safe and home to me. I don't know what it is, but it's just lighting something up in my brain. So from then on, I just did loads of school plays. And then I quit acting.
Oh, right.
So what happened was that when I went off to uni, I went off to study maths. I had a short like period of time where I wanted to study drama, and my parents were very against that, being kind of very typical kind of immigrant Asian parents. So they were very against that. And then I was like, well, what if I do drama and maths? And then, everyone, all the kind of teachers and advisors at my school were like, no, employers will think you're really weird if you do that. And I was like, okay, so I'll just do maths. And then when I got to uni, I was like, okay, I'm still going to keep acting as a hobby. At this point, it was just a hobby. Like I would have loved to become a professional actress at that. Like, I think that was just a complete pipe dream, though. In my head, I was like, acting is not for people who look like me. Because at that point, I didn't identify as disabled, and I did have mental health issues, but apart from that, no physical health issues. And I didn't identify as disabled at the time. But it was my race really that was kind of like holding me back. When I looked at other people who were successful, I was like, okay, well, they had training, or they had contacts in their family, or like they have a father or a mother who's in the industry. I literally had school friends whose fathers and or mothers or whatever, like they were professional actresses or they were professional directors, and they could just get like cast in things because they had a dad in the right place or whatever. And I was like, I don't have any of this. Like my parents are like, they work in a hospital. So that's not going to happen. And then I was looking at other Asian actors who've made it big. And it's just seemed to be this recurring theme that they had supportive parents. So, like for instance, Dev Patel, um, like apparently I think his mother dragged him along to the Skins audition that got
Oh,
him,
really?
that got him the role that in Skins that got him famous. So I was like, okay, clearly like either people have parents or contacts in the industry, or they have parents who are willing to support them and fund them in their hobby. And I don't have either. So it's not for me. So I did a degree in maths, tried to keep acting as up as a hobby during my degree, but my degree was too full on, so I just quit it completely. And then I went on to do like try and do a master's in physics, but that failed miserably. By that point, I was starting to get very ill. So my first year of uni was when I started getting ill. And just from then on, like my condition worsened and worsened and worsened slowly over time. And then I had a complete like flip of my condition in 2019 when I was in the middle of my physics masters. And yeah, so I had to quit that as well.
Oh
But
God. Yeah.
what was interesting is that like back in I think it was 2018, my friend sent me a link, and she doesn't even live in the UK. She lives in the US, but she sent me
Yeah.
a link that was like, Shreya, you should audition for this. And it was a show called Searching for the Heart of Leeds, which was a community project, unpaid community project in Leeds, where I was living at the time. That's when all my career started in Leeds. And um, she was like, just go for it. Like, you're no longer studying. Like I was working full time at the time. And she was like, just go for it. Like it's for anyone with any experience in acting. Like it doesn't matter. And it's a community project. It just sounds a bit like a bit of fun. So I auditioned, got a role in that show, but the director like pulled me aside in the audition and was like, have you heard of our young company? And I was like, what is that? So he was like, he encouraged me to audition for the young company at Leeds, got into that. So I did a bit of like creative. So I was starting to do a bit of creative work, but all of it unpaid. But starting to kind of get into the creative like realms within Leeds. That led to me getting some job offers of like facilitation work in schools and doing workshops and things like that. Um, and then I was like, okay, maybe I can start doing creative stuff again. Like maybe I can like do it as again, it was still in my head, a hobby, a hobby, a hobby, a hobby.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I'm never ever gonna be a professional actress in my life. That's just never gonna happen. I started doing weekly acting classes in Leeds. It was at the time it was called the Yorkshire School of Acting. Now it's called Matt Zena Acting, but it's the same coach, same acting coach called Matt Zena, and it's one of those courses where you pay for the classes and then they also act as your agent.
Right.
So it's one of those kind of schemes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and to me that was really valuable. Like it just meant that I could learn a bit more about acting, kind of improve my skills a little bit. Like I already knew a lot and I was taught really well at school. I had amazing drama teachers at school. And I did drama for A level and GCSE, but it was those acting classes where I kind of solidified my like practice. And then I think I just got lucky basically because I started doing kind of low paid jobs in like local music videos or like promotion videos or whatever. And then I landed a role in a BBC film called Then Barbara Met Alan. And that was in, I
Yeah.
think, 2021. And that was through that same guy, basically. But that was my first ever TV role, like my first ever screen role, I think. No, actually not screen, but like my first ever TV role that was
Yeah.
paid. So that's kind of where it started because he was essentially my agent from then. When my health deteriorated, I had to move away from Leeds and move back in with my parents in North London. At that point, I switched agents, but from then on, I just kind of started working professionally, really, as an actress rather
Oh,
than anything
amazing.
else.
What were you?
Yeah.
You said like with your parents, they weren't too sure about like you going into acting, and so when you got like, for example, then Barbara met Alan, what were their views on it?
That is such a good question because, yeah, anything I did before then was pretty much in their eyes, and to an extent in my eyes, like quite just, oh, it's just a little silly hobby that she has on the side. It's just a little thing that she does that she enjoys, blah blah blah. But like I don't want it. My parents were always like, we don't want it to detract from your main focus of like getting a good job and earning some good money and whatever. So
Yeah.
when they saw me on TV, I think it changed the tone a little bit. They were just like, huh, hang on, she's on the BBC. So, but it was only then. It wasn't any of the stage stuff I did. It wasn't because I started doing quite a few stage things before then, but it was screen that really changed their minds. And it's kind of, I find that's quite common with actors, like regardless of their race or disability status. Like, as soon as family and friends like see them on screen, it kind of solidifies like, oh yeah, this person is an actor to them, even though obviously that's not the definition of what an actor is really. But yeah,
Yeah. Oh, amazing. So you say like you live with a disability and a chronic illness. Could you tell me more about that and how it affects you in acting?
absolutely. So I live with chronic migraine, ME, so myalgic
Mhm.
encephalomyelitis, which is
Same.
also known as chronic fatigue syndrome, and you have it as well.
Yeah.
Um, And I am also living with chronic pain. To be fair, that kind of is something that accompanies both of those illnesses anyway. And I'm also neurodivergent. So the way
Yeah.
it affects my performance is, I think I mentioned earlier, like I usually perform in my wheelchair. If I don't perform in my wheelchair, I'm performing seated, or yeah, usually seated and in a very sort of like non-physical way. That's mainly how it affects my performances. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, for example, like with your Emmy and stuff, how do you approach it and speak to directors and producers about it so they understand? Because you don't want to like kind of shoot yourself in the foot, do you really? That's the kind of thing that I have. But how do you go about it?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Um, I usually go about it in the sense of no one needs to know my medical history. No one needs to know my diagnosis.
Yeah.
They don't need to know. Um, like I'm open with my like diagnoses and stuff with, among people who I consider friends or like good acquaintances, colleagues, things like that. But when it's in a work environment and I'm speaking to an employer, they don't need to know anything about what my disability is. And uh, all they need to know is what my access needs are if I get the job. So what I kind of see it as quite a almost not really transactional, but I kind of see it as a very kind of like this is just a business thing where like, yes, I'm disabled. I'm putting that forward in my application to play a disabled character. That's the only relevant thing. Yes, I'm a wheelchair user. Yeah, if that's relevant to the character, yes. But I'm not going to tell you anything more about why I'm a wheelchair user, why I'm like how I'm disabled or how it affects me until if you offer me a job and then I will ask for what I need. Um,
Yeah.
and that's a bit scary, but it's found that it kind of helps because like it just means that, okay, they've already accepted you for the job because they have decided that you're the best person for the job. And then afterwards, when you ask for what you need in terms of like, okay, sometimes so for instance, I ask for shorter working hours. Um, so I'm kind of like, well, I can only work 5 hours a day. So you're just going to have to work with that. I can't do 2 show days. So you're going to have to hire a swing to cover me for other shows that I can't do. Like when you just ask for what you need in kind of black and white terms, the worst they can say is no. And to be fair, that's really difficult when they do. But
Yeah.
like more likely they're like, yeah, more likely they're going to say yes or like provide you with at least enough so that you can do your job because that's kind
Yeah.
of what their responsibility is.
Yeah. So you found that that way of doing it kind of works. And yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to start doing that. I never know when to like whether to mention it before, the audition or during the audition. So I think that's a good way of doing it, is just say
Yeah.
that, I do have a disability, but when I do get hired or whatever, that's when you kind of talk about your access needs. I think that's a really good way of doing it.
Because
Um,
technically it's illegal for them to sort of judge you based on your bit like
yeah,
disability before they hire you. But sometimes, you know, like biases do happen and they do occur. So it's like, I don't know, sometimes I feel a bit safer in just not disclosing anything that's not directly relevant to the role
yeah,
until I need to. And even then, I don't actually disclose. So, like in my access rider, if anyone who doesn't know what an access rider is, it's just a document that lays down everything that you need to do your best work in a job. Um, in my access rider, it doesn't include anything about my diagnoses or like any of my medical information. It just says what I need. So it will simply, for example, it will be like, I need a place to lie down in a quiet room. I need this, blah, blah, that sort of thing.
yeah, that makes sense. Going back to just being an actor in general, out of all your acting experiences, what's been your favourite? Like, do you have a specific job, and do you prefer screen to stage or like stage to screen? What have been your like favourite experiences throughout your career?
I'm going to repeat what I think pretty much everyone I know with a disability is going to say, but I prefer screen.
Do
I
you?
prefer
Yeah,
screen. A lot of people prefer screen and not because necessarily because of the art form, but just because of the accessibility of it. Like it's just so much more accessible for people with fatigue, like
100%.
energy limited people. It's just like because you're resting in between takes, you can just it's literally almost as if it's designed for energy limited people because you do that short burst of work and then you have to rest or like you don't have to rest but you are literally put in a position where you cannot work until of course the cameras are set up in their new setup or you can't work until the set's ready and you can't work until you've got the other actor in or whatever like
Yeah,
it's almost like forced rest and it's actually been really really beneficial for me because in stage what happens is that yes, okay, in rehearsals, like you get your breaks and stuff like that, but like I am just so tempted to just get chatting to like my fellow colleagues and just kind of getting carried away in conversations and stuff because that's usually what happens. Like people go and pop on the kettle and have a little natter, but like and what I really should be doing is just resting in a corner with like noise cancelling headphones on and like sunglasses on. But I don't want to do that because I want to be like a little puppy dog and get to know everyone.
yeah,
So yeah, screen is more accessible. In terms of like jobs that have really stood out to me is just I think two come to mind. There was one called Perfect. So that's written by Dr. Lawrence Clark. It was a one-off like pilot episode for Dave, which is now I think it's now called You. And that was in 2022 when we filmed that. And I remember like it was the first time that I worked with an access coordinator ever. So I worked with the
yeah,
wonderful Julie Fernandez, who's just a brilliant person all around. And that was my first insight into what access coordination was and how helpful, how deeply helpful it is, not just to disabled creators, but basically everyone. And I was introduced to that concept of like, yeah, you're an actor. You should be able to just have that privilege of, and it is a privilege of turning up to work and just doing your job rather than turning up to work and then worrying about access and then how you're going to get to set and then how you're going to get to your accommodation or how you're going to get to the toilet, whatever. Like, so it was such a game changer in terms of my mindset of like how I advocate for myself and my needs. But also like it was just such a wonderful job. I mean, it was a comedy, so like the atmosphere on set was always just so like light-hearted. Everyone was like laughing. And it was really nice to not be the only wheelchair user as well. Like on set, there was usually at least like three, four wheelchair users at a time. Um, so that was also really lovely. There was
yeah,
another job called Mo Heart Kira Forever, which was a similar thing. I think it was again just a short one-off film, a short film one-off for uh film for. It was called the Four Love series. And
Yeah.
again, it was just like because it was a comedy, and I think I just really enjoy performing comedy, I'm not gonna lie, but the atmosphere on set again was just so like wonderful. The difference there was that with this project, they really, really like prioritized hiring not only disabled talent in front of the screen but behind the screen as well. So pretty much everyone in that set on that set was disabled. Um and it was just the most like welcoming. It was just such a disabled, like led disabled majority space. It was just wonderful. Really good atmosphere.
Yeah. Do you think that makes a difference, like having disabled, not only disabled cast, but disabled crew and disabled writers, because you
A
feel kind of
hundred
more
percent.
comfortable? Yeah.
Oh, 100%. It just changes the game. It just like so for an example, like there's gonna people who are maybe a wheelchair user, for instance, are gonna see the world at a different literally from a different level from most people. And so, like, let's imagine you have a disabled cinematographer who's a wheelchair user. They are gonna like the ideas for how they film and what they capture on their cameras is gonna be fundamentally different. And like, it's just one of those ways in which you bring that like authenticity and uniqueness to a creative project via the people that you're hiring rather than trying to manufacture it through like other means. Like obviously we've got a lot of representation of disabled people where, you know, the disabled characters aren't even written by disabled people anyway.
Yeah.
I think I remember you talking about like a job. I think someone talked on your podcast at some
Yeah.
point about a job where like the disabled character was just like the only part of their character was complaining about their benefits, and
Yeah. A
that was
load
it.
of
And you're
chili.
just
Yeah.
like, really, is this the representation we need? Like, whereas when it's disabled led, when it's disabled majority, like you just feel the difference. It's like so much more authentic, it's so much more alive as well, I found.
Yeah, definitely. Um, like being a disabled actor and a disabled creative, have you faced any like ableism on set or like in rehearsals, and how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I think that the short answer is yes.
Yeah.
It's almost an obvious one.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's gonna happen. Um, I would say the absolute majority of the time, 99.9% of the time, it's unintentional and it's people trying to do their best, but obviously getting it wrong. And to be fair, that's part of it, really. That's part of learning. So that's something that I don't really hold against people that much or organization or, you know, whoever kind of made those mistakes. But yeah, like it's gonna happen. Things are gonna go wrong. Like, you know, I've turned up to an ADR additional dialogue recording um a venue where like the recording studio is down a flight of stairs and then you know the way I have to access there is disabled access but then I need to be escorted by someone to another entrance and then
Yeah.
even that entrance is like really awkward to get through on a wheelchair because there are bikes in the way and all that so just getting into the spaces sometimes is really difficult. I have been like denied things I've asked for as well, which makes my life and my work really, really difficult. So that's also been a challenge. But I mean, usually when those denials are in place, it's because just the funding isn't there or something like that. The funding or the time or whatever isn't there.
Yeah.
So it's something that they can't necessarily control, which is just such a shame.
Yeah. I mean, with my experiences, I've never had, like you, any like massive like ableism issues. But I think it's just the small things like little comments like when I got out of my wheelchair when I was doing a drama, and I think like one of the crew was like, "Oh, it's a miracle," and he's like, "Oh, very funny." Just like little comments
Oh,
like that, and just
yeah.
I know they don't mean to be like rude or whatever, but it's just those little things. I think when disabled actors are coming on set, they kind of need educating a little bit, What do you
A little
think?
bit. Yeah, and then also like wheelchair etiquette is something that I found lacking as well. Like
Yeah,
sometimes people will just push me in my wheelchair without asking me or touch my wheelchair without asking me. I've had people injure themselves because they just started on trying to unfold my wheelchair and stuff without actually like having any proper
yeah,
instruction, and they've just like, they've caught their fingers, they started like it's stressful in that sense as well. It all comes from just lack of
yeah,
awareness and a little bit of ignorance and things like that. But again, it's just learning curve, really. Um, yeah, it's difficult sometimes. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. What changes would you like to see as a disabled creative? Like, what accessibility changes are needed, in your opinion?
Hmm. One thing I've thought about very recently is the intersection between accessibility, um, and also race. So, like, for if it wasn't clear from my name, Shreya M Patel, I'm an Indian woman,
Yeah,
and something I've come across is that like I haven't actually played many Indian parts, or a lot of the parts which are kind of centered in narratives of people with Indian heritage, or even centered in Indian narratives, so plays that are set in India and things like that. Those are the parts that I have not had and will not have because I'm disabled. And it's almost as if there's just not enough out there, like
yeah,
writing, where a character's written as an Indian person, authentically as an Indian person, and then also as a disabled person, or authentically as a global majority person and a wheelchair user, or those intersections of identities. I think right now, disability writing, even though and again, this is a learning process because we're still in the early stages. There's still so much more that can be done in terms of representation of disabled people in the writing rooms. But what I can
yeah,
say at the moment is that I'm quite confident that the representation of those disabled people who are currently getting into writing rooms, they are like majority white. And when I do audition for parts, it is almost always like, it's a part called Sarah, or it's a part called Sophie, and like
yeah,
they are assigning like a brown face to a white written character. Like I can tell that the characters are written as white. There's never,
yeah,
there's never that intersectionality there. So that's something I would like to see improve. Um, on top of that, I think just access coordination, I feel like that needs to grow. It's definitely growing as a thing. Like literally the role of access coordinator is a completely new role anyway. Like I don't think it existed like 10, 15 years ago.
yeah,
Um, but there have been many instances where, because it's in my access rider actually, to be like, please hire an access coordinator because I just think they're so important. But I've had many organizations and companies come back to me and be like, what's an access coordinator? Because it's just still not known well enough. And then when they have employed an access coordinator, again, they approach it with the sense of like, yes, it's the access coordinator specifically for the one disabled person who asked for it. And you're like, no, 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 no. Like the whole point is that an access coordinator addresses access needs of everyone.
yeah,
Like, and it can also go, I mean, it's called an access coordinator, but it can go beyond whether people actually self-identify as disabled or not, because everyone has needs. So,
yeah,
like, yeah, it's an interesting one. I wish that more organizations knew what an access coordinator was, kind of in the same way that we had a rise of like this awareness and knowledge about how intimacy coordinators are important and should be used. I really want the same with access coordinators, and I think it's coming. I think it is happening. I think there's a bit of more of a building of an awareness around it.
yeah. I mean, all the guests I've had on, whenever I've asked this question, who said like access coordinators are a mess.
Yeah.
And I've been in this industry for about, I think, 5 years professionally, and I've never had an access coordinator on a job. And I think, like you said, it would make such a difference. Um,
Yeah.
do you think the industry is becoming more accessible?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Slowly but surely. it's
Yeah.
becoming more accessible. And I think the reason why is because disabled people in the industry are fighting so hard for it as well. In my opinion, I don't see enough fighting for accessibility from non-disabled people.
Yeah.
I've seen the majority of the fight for access coming from disabled people. So that's a bit disappointing, but it's also like, we're such an amazing community of people. And we really
100%.
are. Like we can achieve so much, and I feel like we are getting places. It's
Yeah.
definitely, yeah, it's definitely becoming more and more accessible.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Slowly but surely.
Yeah.
Last question. What advice would you give to not only actors but disabled actors who want to get into acting professionally?
Um, I would say ask for what you need and stop feeling guilty for needing it,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Just ask for what you need. Um, so to come back to what you just said, which was really interesting, you were like, I've been in this industry for 5 years and I've never had an access coordinator. Like a lot of the jobs where I've had an access coordinator, the only reason I had one is because I literally just asked for one. I said,
Yeah.
can you hire an access coordinator? I need one. And sometimes they say no. Like sometimes you are going to be met with resistance or just a full-on no. But sometimes they're just like, oh yeah, sure. Like we didn't know what that was, but okay, like just tell us what to do and we'll do it. So sometimes it is like as simple as just asking.
Yeah.
And with chronic illness, and especially with invisible illnesses like ours, like people don't necessarily know how much you are, like how much your symptoms are bothering you or how much you are suffering in a particular moment. So being that person where maybe, for instance, like in the middle of a rehearsal, you just say, "Hey, can we just take a pause for a minute? Can we bring in a mat and can I continue the rehearsal of this scene lying down or whatever?" Or like
Yeah.
maybe on set, like you're still doing a scene, but you just need an extra 5 minutes to like go off, maybe get an ice pack or like take some meds or whatever, or just have some time away from the light for a bit. Like I found that when I've asked for those breaks, there's actually a little bit of a tiny sigh of relief from like other people in the crew who've like, oh yeah, that means we can
Yeah.
fix this little thing,
Thank
or we
you.
can fix this. Yeah, like there's always something that needs to be done. Any like sets are so busy, like there are so many things that need to be done at any one moment. Like if you say as an actor, I need 10 minutes before we film again, like it's not the end of the world. It's not going to be a big deal. Like just ask and then also don't beat yourself up for asking because like everyone has needs and just because your needs are going to be slightly different to the person next to you or like the non-disabled person you're working opposite, I don't know. Like just because they're a little bit different to what is considered the norm, it doesn't mean that you don't need them. So
Yeah.
just ask and see. Just ask and see. If you don't ask, you
Yeah.
don't get.
It's about being vocal, isn't it? And I'm like really stubborn, and I get worried about like speaking to directors and producers about asking for what I need, but I
Mm.
think you just have to do it, don't you, really? Because otherwise you're not going to get what you need.
I like, yeah, and there's this perception, there's this worry as well that you'll be perceived as a bit of a diva.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you know what? Like, if someone perceives me as a diva for asking for something that is literally going to reduce my pain
Yeah.
and reduce my fatigue, because if they had the opportunity to reduce the pain and fatigue or the symptoms of a loved one, they would do it in a heartbeat. So me asking for that for myself should not be something diva-ish in any way. It's just self-care. That's all it is. And it is just a little bit of like, sometimes you do need to fight for it, but it is just self-advocacy and feeling guilty for it is kind of basically you're saying to yourself that you are a burden when actually you're
Yeah.
not. There was one thing that I did which completely changed my mindset. So whenever I had to cancel, because I'm a maths tutor as well, so it's like so whenever I had to cancel lessons with my students, or like whenever to cancel social occasions or whatever because I had a migraine attack, or like I was too fatigued or whatever, your first instinct, and tell me if I'm wrong, but your first instinct is it to say, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah.
Oh God.
Is
Yeah.
that your
Yeah.
first instinct? It was
Yeah.
mine as well. And then I was like, why am I apologizing for my own symptoms?
Yeah. Something that I can't
Why?
control.
Because I can't control them. Yeah, like I can't control them. I didn't choose to get these symptoms. I didn't choose it. I wouldn't choose it in a heartbeat. I don't want them. And actually, the person who's probably the most inconvenienced by your symptoms is yourself, because you're the
Yeah.
one who has to then go through them and experience them and miss out on the thing that you wanted to do and instead deal with the symptoms that you're dealing with. So it's actually like, why should you apologize for something that's not your fault and you can't control in the first place? So what I did is I just completely shifted my language. I was just like, I'm never going to apologize for my symptoms again. I'm
Yeah.
just going to state them and be like, unfortunately, this is, in
Mm.
like in professional settings, and in an email or something, if I'm kind of I'll just be like, unfortunately, I'm experiencing a migraine attack, or like I'm experiencing this, that, and I won't be able to XYZ, and just state it, and that's it, and just leave it as a statement, because that's all it is. It's just a statement. It doesn't put this feeling of guilt on you. It doesn't actually like pin any sort of blame either, because when you're saying, oh, I'm so sorry, like you're just basically being like, I'm sorry for inconveniencing you by existing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
because your symptoms are going to be there whether you like it or not. Yeah, that's kind of that's part of existing as a person with a chronic illness. So saying sorry for it feels really weird to me.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah, that's like one big thing that's definitely changed my thinking. And it's definitely helped me with all my other stuff, like advocating for myself in jobs and things. Like, just don't apologize for what you need, ever.
Yeah. You should never apologize and never feel like a burden. Definitely.
No.
Thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank you for having me. This has been so nice.
Thank you so much, Shreya, for this interview. I have put Shreya's social media links in the bio, so please go and check her out. Thank you for listening. Bye.